We all know this parable. We hear it practically every year, comes up, and we know a lot of the details, and we've heard all this before. We know that the son disrespects the father. The father is still alive, and even though he is physically alive and well in front of him, this son wants his portion so that he can run off and do his own thing. This is an action of dividing property that only takes place when the father dies. The son, for all practical purposes, is saying, Dad, you're dead to me. Just give me what you owe me, and I'm on my way. And the father lovingly complies. The son goes off, he's in a foreign land, drinking, prostitutes, the whole thing, and ultimately an incredible famine sweeps the land. He is now penniless, he is in a foreign land, a land that obviously is not Jewish, it must be Gentile, because the man he ends up working for has pigs, and he sends him to go and work with the pigs. And so this Jewish boy, raised Jewish, that technically never have any interactions with pigs at all, is now tending and caring for pigs and feeding pigs, and he himself now is not able to even feed his hunger, his physical starvation, with the pods, the food that they're giving to the pigs to eat. Notice the motivation behind this younger son. You know, I'm starving. But yet, at my father's house, all those servants there, none of them are starving. He goes on to say they have plenty to eat and to drink. I know what I'll do. And this is where the manipulation comes in. The motivation is hunger. He's going to die of starvation. The manipulation is, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son, but please, let me come work for you as a hired hand. He probably practices this in his head the entire way home. He's trying to figure out exactly what tone of voice does he put behind it. You know, how do I say it? Can I possibly get the slightest tear to develop in the corner of my eye to show some level of sincerity to the fact that what I really need my dad to do is to feed me? You know, but I really don't want to go home. It's just I don't know where else to go where I can get fed. So he goes, and notice the father, still at a great distance, recognizes his son's walk. I don't know about you, and if you have children, you know how they walk. You could tell by their swagger where your kid is in a crowd. You can. I know where Arthur is in a crowd. I watch the head bobbing a certain way, and I know that that's Arthur. I just know that. The father, from a distance, is able to recognize his son's swagger. But this is where things start getting crazy. A man of this father's wealth and capacity would never, ever be caught running. They don't run. Everyone tends to them. Everyone cares for them. They never run. Running is a non-societal function for a man of his wealth and background. And yet, he tears to his son. He runs. He catches a glimpse. He doesn't ask for a horse. He doesn't tell his servants to get the cart. He actually ends up running from a distance to get to his son. And when he gets there, he embraces him. And so as he's already embraced him, the son never said anything, but the son practiced this line the entire time. So of course he's got to get this in. Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I'm not worthy. And he's not even paying attention to the words. He doesn't even care what the son is saying. Doesn't care about anything except for the fact that his son left, was at a distance. He wasn't able to see him. He wasn't able to enjoy his company. Yes, he abused the father, disrespected the father, told the father by his actions that the father was dead, but it didn't make any difference. And so as he is still playing out his words, the father ends up telling the servants, who at this point are running after him, trying to figure out what's going on with our master. Why is he running across a field to go after this guy? They're running to tend to him, and probably, being a man my size, probably getting across, a field to get to his son, he probably needed a drink by the time he got to the other side. And the servants are there to care for him, and he tells them immediately, look, go, get a robe, which shows lineage, right? It shows his place in society, and put it on him. The boy's barefoot, and says, put sandals on his feet. But notice the ring. The ring is fundamental. With the ring, the boy can go anywhere. The boy could go anywhere and purchase anything, because he's bearing the crest of his father on the ring. So despite the fact that he took half of everything his father had and threw it all away on debauchery, the father still makes him an equal again by putting a ring on his finger. And you could imagine just the the servants running back and forth from the house, ring, sandals, robe, and the boy, who probably smells horrible. He's been rambling around with pigs all day. He probably stinks terribly. And yet there he is. He's standing there now with this coat around him and all this. And then as he's standing there, the father yells out, get that fatted calf. Now, fatted calves are basically prepared and saved for special occasions, mostly holy religious days. And yet he tells him, go get the fatted calf, slaughter it now. Raising this event of his son's return to this magnitude of a holy day, of a sacred day, recognizing that the father sees in the return of his son an act of God. He sees in the return of his son an act fulfilled by God. And his prayers, most likely, have been answered. And he is overwhelmed with the graciousness of God that his son now stands before him. We know the older son comes back, and it says that he hears music and dancing. The dancing part scares me, because how loud were they dancing for him to hear at a distance that there was music and dancing that he heard? But we'll leave that to the cultural specialists to determine what kind of dancing it was. But he's a little put off, and he won't go in. And the father comes out and begs with him, please, come in. And he says, but I've been with you, I've been honorable, I have done everything you have asked me to do, and you never gave me anything. And what is the correction? The correction isn't that you should have waited for me to give you something. The correction is, it was always yours. You have been with me always, and everything I have is yours. But it is right to kill the fatted calf, because your brother was lost and now is found. We know all the characters. The one group of people we never talk about is, who is this being spoken to? Tax collectors and sinners, but also Pharisees and scribes. That's the audience. The one group of people we never talk about in this parable are the people inside the party. We never talk about them. They're there. We know they're celebrating. Someone's eating the calf, right? Someone's making this loud noise, the loud dancing. We know this. But what did these people who were invited to the celebration think or say when they found out that the son disrespected the father in such a way that he would ask for his half so he could leave? These were all neighbors. These are small Jewish towns. Word was going to get around that the son wanted what he wanted and left. Took what he had and left. They're probably all sitting around talking about the son's disrespect, the fact that the father has raised him all this time and he's done this to the father. The father's always been good and gracious to him all this time, and yet he acts like this, he does this, and he does it in such an enormous, profound, ugly way that he disrespects the father to call him dead while he's still alive. This father who put clothes on him and cared for him and tended to his every need and made sure he was educated and made sure he had everything, and the father who worked so hard for everything the father had, or else he wouldn't have half of anything to take with him. So in the midst of all this, the town has got to be sitting around talking about the fact that this boy has behaved so poorly and improperly, and you can imagine the curses and the acts of separation that were taking place between the entire town and also the boy, saying he's not part of us anymore. Look at what he's done. He's no longer welcome. He's outside. He's done this. He's acted this way. He's behaved this way. He's thought this way. He's outside of who and what we are. He is separated. He's never going to be welcome again. And yet, honestly, there they all are, celebrating his return. The other thing is the father. The father at this point is aware that the son is home and has been the one to invite everyone to come. And you could imagine the people of the town sort of sitting back and saying to themselves, he took him back? What's wrong with him? Is he crazy? Is there something wrong with him? Look at everything the son has done to him. How can he behave like that? That doesn't make any sense. He has no right. He has no right to be that generous, to be that compassionate. The boy's done wrong. He deserves to get what he deserves. He's meant to be an outcast. He should remain an outcast. This is the way it is. This is the way it should be. And it's final in that capacity. Let's leave it alone. But the father is acting crazy. What is that? And you cannot tell me somewhere in the midst of all this, somewhere at the party of which they all accepted to come, because look, free food, free drink, music, dancing. Who's going to say no to a party no matter what? So they're showing up. But you can't tell me that they're not pulling him aside and saying to him, what are you doing? What's wrong with you? This is unheard of. This is absurd. This is crazy. We don't know from the story whether or not the son gets up the next morning and is dutiful or not. We have no idea what the son does next. All we know is that he's come back and he's eaten a really good calf, fatted, having an amazing celebration, and also dancing and listening to music and drinking wine. I mean, we know that. We know that he was at the party. We know we were celebrating. We know that. We have no idea what the son does the next morning. We don't know if he gets up and respects the father in the same way that the father has shown respect to him. Has he shown the father any segment or portion of the love that the father poured out on him by bringing him back into the group, by establishing him again as part of the family, by raising him up, by not even allowing him to finish his and never even asking what he did, never going over it. You don't hear anything in here where the dad goes, look, I'm really glad you're home, but there's none of that. None of that stuff happens in this story. None of it happens, and we have no idea whether or not the son sticks around the next day or not. We don't know anything. The thing that we are barraged with is the reality that the father is amazingly compassionate. And the fact that the father is amazingly compassionate is Jesus' way of trying to explain to you and I how the father is. What is his character? How does he act? How does he think? What are his impulses? How does he react to things. What is it that he wants in a relationship? What is it that he would expect from someone who has dismissed him and has hurt him so badly and has run off, and yet in the slightest instant, for the worst type of reasons, to return? Can't tell me people back then weren't hoping that they'd get to heaven. And so, they were doing all the church stuff because they were hoping to get to heaven, or that people come back to God because they're terrified of going to hell. A lot of that stuff going on. A lot of preachers preaching that. And yet at the same time, none of that really seems to matter to the Father, because he doesn't care what the motivations are. He simply cares that you've turned and that you're moving in his direction. And God's not even sitting and waiting for you to finish the travel through the field to get to him. He's already bolting on his way to you the minute you turn. The second that you turn, the Father is already running after you. And when he gets to you, which apparently God's a pretty fast runner, because when he gets there, he's already throwing a robe around you. He's putting shoes on your feet, and he's giving you the family crest on your finger. He's raising you up and establishing you to have access to the kingdom. And the scribes, as much as the tax collectors and sinners, are celebrating this new revelation of a loving and dearly and deeply compassionate God, the scribes and the Pharisees are going, no, doesn't work like that. Haven't you read? Haven't you reviewed? Haven't you looked at the gospel? Haven't you read the Bible at all? Haven't you seen any of the, haven't you read the prophet? Right? They're all quoting all this stuff. And Jesus is simply trying to sit back and say, yes, but I know the Father. I know how he is. I know how he behaves and acts. I know what has been done in the past, but the reason I'm here is to let you know that it's okay. It's okay, even with the worst reasoning you possibly can have, to come back to the Father. The Father's entire excitement is the fact that you've chosen to come back at all, that you've given him any thought at all, as poor as that thought might be. And the scribes and the Pharisees, whose entire life, at this point, 663 laws, 663 laws they have to fulfill. They're following the law, they're doing everything, they're following the right path, and anyone who does anything outside of those 663 are not considered worthy, and the judgment is, we're righteous, we're absolute, we are accepted, we are blessed and graced by God, and you're not. And there's an awful lot of that going on in our world today, too. A lot of people using a lot of scripture improperly and very selectively to isolate and alienate. Isolate and alienate them not just from institutions, but to isolate and alienate them from God. And the problem is that you have that reality that they're talking, and then you have this reality that Jesus is talking, and you have to come to some point and say, either they're right and Jesus is wrong, or Jesus is right. And maybe we just didn't understand the rest the way we should have. And so, for you and I, we go through this cycle all the time. I have to believe that this son is probably going to make mistakes again. He is. He's made a huge blunder. When we make huge blunders, typically it means we're probably going to make another one. Maybe hopefully not as big because we've learned from the first huge blunder, but somewhere along the way. And you know something, you're not alone. Because all of us make huge blunders, and all of us make blunders all throughout the course of our life. But Jesus knows this and speaks this parable. Jesus knows this and speaks this parable. And recognize, if you will, he is speaking to tax collectors and sinners. He is not telling them that they have to convert. He's not telling them they have to be baptized. He's not telling them that they have to go to church on Sunday. He's not telling them any of the things that we believe, or donations. He's not telling them any of the things that we commonly hear as requirements, prerequisites almost, for a relationship with God. He is telling them right now that if your heart feels moved in the slightest, smallest way, even if it's because you are deeply wounded and hurt, you are terrified and anxious, if you are scared, whatever the reasoning is, if you're turning in the slightest way to the Father's bolting to get to you and let you know and to embrace you with all of the pig smell that we must have as broken human beings. God runs and embraces us where we are and starts throwing out commands to reestablish us as part of the family without even caring what our reasoning is. He's just ecstatic that we're there. This is what Jesus tells us the Father is like. Everything else, I think, is inaccurate. This is what Jesus takes this opportunity to lay out. This is Jesus without compromise. This is the Jesus that we have to believe in. These are the words and the scenario that you and I have to clear out all the other clutter and junk in our hearts, in our heads that we've been taught or told to, or whatever the case might be. And we have to ask ourselves, well, how is the Father? What does the Father think about me in my sinfulness? How does God see me? Jesus already told us. And yet for you and I, we have the hardest time believing that it could be true, that God loves us that much, or that we're that worthy to be loved by God. I'm sorry, Jesus says yes. Jesus says yes. All the other stuff is us. It's just us. And we're getting in the way of turning around to return home. We're getting in the way. As we start our week, and as we ask God to be with us through the course of this week, let this be the image of the God that you and I carry. And when we stumble this week, and we will, when we make a blunder, and we will, when we make a poor choice, and we will, just turn around. Just turn around and look at a distance, and you'll see the Father running to you, because he loves you as you are. Nothing stops us from being sons and daughters of God. Nothing separates us from the love of Christ. God bless you.